Drift Island, the Iron Drift King podcast, hosted by Marcel Uhlig and Jacob Gettins.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Iron Drift King podcast. My name is Jacob Gettins, and this week we've got a regular guest. We've got Marcel back on, but we've got the very popular right now. I'm not saying you won't be in the future, but Reese Marin, who recently got announced as an FD judge, but has a vast array of knowledge when it comes to drifting, not just in the United States, but you've done work in a few different places now, and I think between all three of us, we've got a pretty good idea of what drifting is like in different parts of the world, and that's kind of the big thing we want to talk about today. So, yeah, Reese, is there? We can do a quick intro, and people can find out who you are if they don't already know.
I started drifting back in 2005. I was big onto the grassroots drifting scene for a long time. Slowly over time, had a position open up where I could be an instructor, kind of help out at my local club. And that turned into going to Formula Drift events and having opportunities to judge since I was around it more and more. And then all of that kind of materialized into now having my own drift school, having to a spot for many people in the past in Formula Drift, recently with Chelsea when he won, and now moving up to be a judge in Formula Drift. Had the opportunity to go international a couple times to do instruction as well as do competition judging as well in Brazil and other places. So it's been cool to just kind of see what the perception is from other places and how I've been coming up in the sport.
Yeah, I think that the South American part of it is like, we see drivers, especially coming out of Brazil, a lot recently, but I think it's one of those areas that drifting is still very much developing, but there is definitely a different style there as opposed to, Europe and North America and Asia and Australia as well. So, it's cool. I think it'd be cool to kind of get your perspective on that. So, I think really to kick it off, Marcel, obviously you've got a very deep understanding of European drifting. From your perspective, what do you think is the biggest difference between, we'll start off easy, between European style, and maybe North American style?
Are we talking the drifting style in general, or you think we're talking the drifting scene, as whole?
Let's start with the style, of driving, and then I think the scene really is part of that, but maybe just the driving style in general.
I think European drifting is very much based on precision. It's we in the recent years we started splitting hairs in Europe. That's what made it also very complicated. I think European drifters are very very much performance and success driven. So it's not just the success in the competition itself, but be your best in the shortest amount of time possible. And I think in the US style is. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the US, style is a bit more of a factor. It's like I think it's more valued to have your own kind of thing going on as a driver, even if it's a criteria, of course, in Europe. But it's drivers have to be so precise to even get into the shows, and I think that kills a little bit the excitement, for some drivers, because as we talked in our very first episode, we talked about James, driving on and off kind of modus. So it would be very cool, if we get the fun back into the game in Europe. I'm not saying it's not fun, but you know what I mean. Like it's drivers a bit more loose, But of course, that whole precision, that whole target behind that is to figure out good lead lines, to see who is good enough. But it's I think it takes so much away of the personality of the individual drivers, and and I think the US is more about who are you as a driver, and how do you look on track.
Yeah, that's I think that's I mean, a good point. When we see some certain European drivers come over to the US, I mean, I think Frederick Osbo to start off, like his nickname was the robot for the longest time. And it was just because he was so precise and so exact that like, some of the style, I guess, can't always follow with that. But US, I don't think US has as much style as Japanese drifting, but I will say in some regards it has more style than European drifting. Um, Reese, your thoughts on that?
Um, I think that a huge factor that gets played a role in this equation is that the availability of amount of events that we can go to in America currently. Um, as I said many times before, it's in America we are very blessed because, I mean, you could almost, depending what part of the country you're in, you can go drifting almost every single day, definitely almost every weekend, as long as you have the funds. And obviously, our biggest hurdle is traveling to different parts of the country, as I'm sure it is for everyone. But specifically for us, we don't have to deal with going through countries. We just have to go to different states. But if you're geographically placed correctly, you will have access to a lot more events. Now, the reason I think that plays a role is because that's kind of a safety net. It allows there to be so many different genres of drifting in America. There's people that are extremely hardcore, old school 2000s Japanese style. And then you'll have people that are like the real American style where it's like, I just want a V8 in my car and I don't care if it really looks that cool as long as it looks cool to me. So there's so many different genres that exist that I think it allows that perception to kind of look that way. And I think the only reason it exists is because we have that many events. It allows us to, I don't care about doing it this way. I can just do it this way. Like there's people that don't compete at all, and have no want to go compete. Like their whole thing is just to do cool videos or go to cool events and do that. And to a fault, I'm pretty much that way too. Like I like competition and like it pays the bills and it does all that. But I do think it creativity wise, it stuns us because we have to work inside of a box. Whereas like if you're not competing and you're not worrying about that stuff, you can just kind of be more creative and come up with whatever. I mean, like for example, right? Like in Canada, we rewarded what's his face? The dude with the Corvette. I slipped that. Blue Corvette. No,
Blue Corvette. Oh, Luke Fink.
Luke Fink. Right? Luke Fink. Yeah. He did a backy and he got rewarded for that. Years ago, if he would have done that, he would have gotten like a 0. You know what I mean? And so like allowing that type of creativity to come over is so I can see how people think it's style. I just think we just have a lot more time to do so many other different things opposed to other places. Because every country that I go that I talk to that's outside of the United States, they don't have as many events. I'm not talking Japan, that's different. But everyone else, like, I don't think they have as many events as we do where we can just be like, I'm just going to do this little niche in drifting. You know what I mean? I think point. Like, that's how I kind of look at it. Because in Brazil, I've been down there and it's like, it's either you're doing it the way they're doing it or you're part of a micro niche of people that are doing it a different way, like that are into something different. I think that plays a factor.
Reese, how is it in the US? I mean, like you just said, there's multiple different genres of drifting, how it's done, and how people experience it. Is it like that fans, let's say Formula Drift is the top category, correct?
It's a top. Depends. It for some of us, if we want to go number wise, yeah. But there's some people that in America that do not believe that, and they're in their own market, their own niche. They've never been to a Formula Drift event. They don't plan on going, and they're more into a traditional, aesthetically pushed style that has made. I mean, like the biggest version of that would be Final Bout, and I think Final Bout is awesome. It is like watching a magazine come to life. It is what I saw drifting growing up. And if I were to go to switch over and start drifting like that, it would cost me equally just as much money to now start doing that as it was doing some competition stuff or anything else. So it's grown to be something big where now they Final Bout that started, I'm pretty sure it started in America, now does events in Japan, so there is a whole other alternative world to drifting that is healthy in my opinion. Maybe not in number wise, but I mean, culture wise, it is very rich in nature.
Okay, but where I was getting at is like, or where I was going to is, the fans of let's say the hardcore Formula Drift fans, are they looking down on the other types of events and on the other ways of drifting?
I think that's a personal, I don't know. I think a lot of people just look at it like, this is just what I do. Some people may not even know that world even exists. You know what I mean? Like I know there's people that don't know that final bout's a thing because all they've ever seen is Von Gittin Jr. or Matt Field or whoever, and then they just follow that rhythm of drifting. You know what I mean? So it's that big, like the culture is that big, and I'm sure Jacob can attest that it's so big that you can get lost in just the niche market for sure if you're into that.
Well, I mean, it really comes down to like population, right? Like there's just the population of the United States and North America as a whole is just so vast that like you can have a style like there's Final Bout. I mean, I know there's like Vibes and stuff like that where it's like the cars have to look perfect. There's no like they look down on zip ties or any damage on the car. You're doing team drifting at that point where it's 3 cars and it's it's more like synchronized swimming, if you will, where it's like how close can you get them, how tight. In Europe, Gatbill's got the big 3 competition and stuff, but there's entire series that's all they do. And those drivers won't go drive a traditional tandem competition. I mean, I'm not all of them. I don't want to speak, in broad terms, but like, yeah, they'll only do style based events, not, who's a faster driver, if you will. But that is solely because of the amount of population. But to answer your question, like there are definitely people who look down on different types of drifting and different style based. But I would say the hardcore drifting fans, the like true enthusiast general fans, just love the sport and they're not going to look at one style and be like, oh, that's wrong. It's just like, that's a different part of the same sport that we have. So
it's a different flavor. You know what I mean? We have, that's why I'm saying we're so blessed in America because you can get into any, you want to be traditional Japan. There's tons of events you can go to that specifically do that. You want to do more momentum based layouts. There's events in America. There's tracks that are being made. Like there was one that was just built in Alabama that layout is very Mihan type of style, which is momentum based, like the little double clutch kick weight transfer. Like that's a style of driving that you won't see at many pro-am events. And because most of the dudes can't do that technique, like that initiation where they do that backy, like, a lot of props to the grassroots dudes that do it. And I've tried to learn how to do it too, because it is an advanced technique in my opinion. And I know that there's advanced guys that have no reason to do that and they can't do it, but it's cool to see that it makes a transition over with Luke Fink, for instance, who does it phenomenally. So it's just, I tell people like, you just got to come here and see what it is. Like, Japan is amazing. Don't get me wrong. It is awesome. I'm sure it's the origin of it all, but it's like you come to America and it's like you're walking into a mall and like as you're walking around, you can pick any flavor you want. There's events where they hang pumpkins it's called Pumpkin Smash. They hang pumpkins on an outside zone and you come in and you know what I'm saying? Like there's like demolition drift ones, you know what I mean? Like it's just, and those cars are flipping. So it's like very American, right? Like just to even see something like that's very American. But it's cool to see that. So it opens up to so many different things. And obviously there's people that will never do that because they're like, I'm not going to take my beautiful car and do that. But it just goes to show you like the scale of drifting and the flavors and the variety are pretty vast here because like Jacob said, the population, and I don't know how else to put it, but this is America. Like, I guess this is just what we do. You know what I mean?
Well, but maybe that's what it is, like this is, and that is exactly why I asked that. Is I have the feeling that in Europe, as soon as you're not in the absolute top championship, it's like it's not worth watching. It's like it's not existing. Of course, we have different styles, we have different events, we have grassroots events, where people just go there to enjoy drifting in itself. But I think in Europe we kind of left we left the fun behind, somehow. It's like, okay, you're top level or you're nothing, it's not it's not worth enjoying, or you don't get many people to enjoy it. It's of course, I don't want to always speak for everyone else, but I'm now 14 years into that. And I've seen many different people come and go, and it was always performance, performance, performance. It was nothing else. We had a few people speak out, for Japanese style not because Japan is the greatest. No, it was about, hey, look, this is also a way you can do that. But because it was never adapted in any kind of official event, in any kind of a major event, it was just never done, and it was never appreciated. And I think that is a problem. Like we killed the creativity, and we killed the fun in drifting in Europe. And I mean that, and that's why the Iron Drift King this year, has a different approach, because yes, performance is super important, and yes, we will deliver fantastic lead and chase runs, in the Iron Drift King. That's not the point, but feeling good about it, enjoying the moment, enjoy the vibe and the culture itself. That's something we need to bring back. People got very, very stiff, I would say, in their personalities.
I think you guys, and I only say this because in America we consume so much content, because there's so much going on here. A byproduct of being American is that we get bored really quick, and then we start looking to see what's going on everywhere else. So like, I think, and I could be wrong, this is just my opinion, but I think in America we definitely like feed in and embrace like what's going on in Instagram when it comes to all the street, I don't want to say street drifting, but that culture. But you guys do have that, because you guys have Next Level. I think they're from Poland, or I don't know where, but we've seen videos from these dudes that are very, again, we don't know their story, we don't know their background. All we know is that when we see videos from like Poland or anything in Europe, Go Hard, again, we don't know their story, we don't know the people, we just know Go Hard does some pretty gnarly stuff. But remember, that's how we're consuming this content, not knowing their back. And we look at it like, from over here, they're like, yo, there's some cool stuff going on in Europe. That's how we look at it, because we see what pops off in Instagram from like people like Next Level that are huge on the style side. They're all, they're huge on, if you have Hurt that's going over to drive, like Hurt's going to drive a car that's baller and it looks like it has a lot of street cred and stuff like that. Yeah. So that culture exists there. I just don't know how the European world accepts it or not, or because we accept it in America. We're like, yo, that stuff is cool, and it embraces and it starts a niche and it starts to grow and grow and grow. But I think you guys do have it over there. You guys just got to like embrace it. You know what I mean? Because
exactly. We do have people, of course, that push in this direction. Euro JDM is something that has been growing a lot in the last years. And because one of the major car shows that is held in Poland, they started adapting that, and they started as a show drift event, during their car show. They started showing people with very, very, very low cars, cool body kits, cool liveries, nice wheels and stuff. And people do enjoy that. It's just not appreciated as a, how can you say? It's like, it will always be just a hobby. I'm not saying everyone needs to be a professional in what they're doing, but it would be great if we would allow a few more markets to grow. But we kind of push that down constantly, and that's weird to me.
There's something, I mean, I've only been over to Europe a couple of times, but there's something that I within the culture I found very different than America or North America, and I mean even into Australia and stuff as well. And that is that, like, within America, we are almost taught and pushed to be different, to stand out, to be a lot, to be loud, to be ridiculous, to be one of a kind. Whereas I feel like in Europe, that's either not educated as much or not pushed as much, or people are ostracized or pointed out because they're different. Like, even if you look at some, and this isn't, once again, this isn't all of Europe and this isn't all of America. I mean, I think we should just like start, anything we're saying is obviously very generalistic, and we're not saying this is everybody, but, and I think some of this too just is like Scandinavian culture, Norwegian culture, because that's where I spent the most time. Like, clothing wise, it's very bland colors, like it's very neutral colors. Everybody drives regularly the same cars. The houses all kind of look the same. And the idea is not to stand out. You don't want people,
Yes.
like
Yes.
noticing you, whereas American culture, it's completely different. It's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. So I think that can trickle down into the motorsport, into social media. Like, Americans have an incredible background in making themselves notice. So their social media, their YouTube, all that stuff that's what you have to do. Whereas if somebody in Europe, it seems, does a really good job on social media, it's like, oh wow, like this is incredible. Look what they're doing. Whereas it's expected. Like if you're drifting in America and you're taking it seriously, you have to be doing social media.
Yeah.
Whereas even when I was researching for Iron Drift King last year, I couldn't find half these guys on Instagram. Like I'm looking through trying to make notes and I'm like, this guy hasn't posted in 2 years yet. He's a top 10 competitor in Europe. Like, what is going on?
That is what I mean. That is what I mean. It wasn't appreciated to be different. There has been a few guys that had that took on the ultimate struggle of being their own person, and go through with it. Like, Teemu Petula, he kind of built a brand around that. But this is one out of many, many thousand. It's as you just said, it is more important to be very, very good, and accomplish nothing with that, except some trophies, then do something cool, make people smile, give them a good time, and accomplish way more with that. Because marketing essentially is what is that about, right? This is we want to see cool stuff, we want to see unique stuff, and a lot of people have so much to offer because everyone has their own personality, but we kind of push them into a corner and said, okay, you have to behave professionally all the time. Don't say anything you really think, and now we have, this is hard to say, so please don't hate me for that, Europe, but we have a lot of robots, that kind of just follow some steps in order to reach the next step in professionalism, but completely forgot to have a good time and show people a good time. And that is sad.
I always relate back to like F1 where like Max Verstappen is considered ridiculous because of the things that he says, right? Like people are like, oh, he says all this stuff. But like, if you go watch NASCAR, like what Max is saying is so low level basic. Whereas in NASCAR, these guys are screaming and swearing and there's fist fights. Like you go to a dirt track, any dirt track in America on a Sunday, there's a fist fight at the racetrack between drivers. Like it's happening.
Yeah.
Whereas that wouldn't, I believe there was a karting guy, a karting driver, I might have been in Germany, who got out and got into a pushing match and he got removed from karting for like 4 years because he pushed somebody. Whereas in America, like we're expecting them to fight. So like, I think there's so much more fear within Europe about getting in trouble for saying something wrong. Whereas in America, it's like you say ridiculous shit because you want the attention, you get canceled, and then you pop back up a couple months later and everyone's kind of forgot about it because they're on to the next thing.
Yeah, it's I think by nature in America, we have a very controversial attitude that subconsciously everyone in the world kind of likes. Because we speak out, because we say what's on our mind, and you guys can view it however, like freedom or whatever it is, but that's just, and the comparison is very simple for me because I am very different by nature than my counterpart family in Colombia, and they're in South America, and even, and you would think it'd be different, but my belief system on how I'm going to go, my ethics, it's just a lot of things, my approach, me being an extrovert, it's just very, also growing up in where we grow up, it really just allows for a lot of things to just kind of fall in place for what this is. But I think the biggest contributor to what you're probably touching on is, for me and for a lot of us, drifting came into our lives like skateboarding. Like that's the look, that's like the attitude, the feeling. It was like something you shouldn't be doing. It was a very like, is that ever going to work out type of thing. Right now, there's people that are looking at it like, oh, I can make a career out of it. Had it started like that in America, we wouldn't have the personality that we do. But a lot of us very much view it as as a skateboard video. And if you want to see proof of that, go back and watch the original Drift Alliance video with Chris Forsberg, Von Gittin Jr., Tony Angelo, who used to be a judge, and another dude, Ryan, who's not in there no more. Or go watch the second video. They look exactly like anything you would see on Thrasher currently. In America, we've kind of walked away from doing that, but now there's a whole other subculture that only does that type of video because we have TikTok and Instagram. So it goes back. We have the avenues for it. You know what I mean? And I think that's what we kind of take off with it. We just have that alternative look on, like, we're just going to go about it this way. And I think universally and globally, everybody kind of looks like if there's a rule that needs to be broken, it's probably an American dude that's doing it. You know what I mean? And really, it's like, nah, screw that. We're going to do it our way because whatever, you know what I mean? And I think that by nature has just kind of been what you'll see in North America. You know what I mean? And I say that too, because and the drifting is very much the same way in certain areas, you know?
Yeah. Quebec. I talk about Quebec drifting, which is French Canadian drifting is very ridiculous and over the top. And all the cars are insanely loud. Like they purposefully make them loud. They make them bright. They're always like neon colors or reflective wrap. Lots of anti-lag and two-step and stuff. And it's like, but that's also part of that culture. So it, on the European side, like how, Marcel, you can probably answer this for us. Like, how did drifting start in Europe? Like Reese said, like for us, it was more of a skateboard, BMX, extreme sport culture. Like, was it the same in Europe or did it come over differently?
Look, it has been before I got into it. So I don't have the experience from the very start. But as far as I'm aware, it has been straight on really big tracks. Okay, it has been on professional race tracks. It has been exhibitions in UK. The guys over in UK have been, I think, the biggest driving force, in European drifting for a long time. And they had all those major racetracks where they had some exhibitions with Japanese drifters, and because naturally, because of the right-hand driven cars, they had this kind of import going on. So most of the European import cars from Japan came for a decade or longer. They came from UK, because that was the way how they were shipped before Europe started, importing them. Central Europe started to import those cars themselves, but it all started with Japanese cars, Japanese culture, and it came from there. But it always has been presented or tried to present as professional as possible, because all the motorsports we had, the big ones, have been Formula One. We had rally, we had DTM, and everyone tried to compare drifting with that. That's my take on it, and I think that's also the problem. I was just thinking when you were talking about very bright colors, very loud cars. The thing is, in Europe, no, it should be everywhere, but in Europe we're very keen on safety, and that's extremely important because it's still a motorsport. They're very high horsepower cars. They raise fuels that are highly flammable, sometimes not even visible, when they're burning. So it is very important that everyone is safe. So you ask someone to follow 100 rules and then still be cool, and that is not easy,
That's a good point.
And I think that is something. That's the kind of balance we need to achieve now again. Be professional, yes, because you're a racing driver. You have a responsibility, towards yourself, towards your team, towards your family, but also towards the sport. But please be also extremely cool. And that is a very, very hard combination to make, I think. But that is it's necessary. I would never. In Iron Drifting, we're very, very German. Very strict. No, and I mean that. No, it's no, we are very, very tough when it comes on rules, but just in order to keep them safe, make it out of that event, drive as hard as you can, but please do not hurt yourself. That's the whole purpose behind it. But it's
funny you say that, because then you'll go to Ibisu and that place is like lawless over there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and that's like the Mecca, right?
Style. That's Mecca style, right? Like I know there's a it still exists in Canada, but doesn't exist in its like in the same fashion. It was a series called Top Drift. There's a Top Drift in the US as well, but it was kind of notorious for no tech inspections. And it ran like that for years.
At Shannonville?
Yeah, at Shannonville. Aaron Lousy from Buddy. That's where I grew up. That's the drifting I started with, was like, you bring whatever, nobody really asks any questions. As long as you don't, like, as long as you're, it's not super obvious from the outside of the car that it's falling apart. And even still, like, that was pretty lax. But like, some of the best Canadian drifters came out of that program because they could just drive constantly. Like, nobody ever stopped them. And yeah, like a lot of style came out of it. A lot of craziness came out of it because there wasn't the rules. There was no stringent. It was hot lapping. There was no run groups. You had guys who barely knew how to drift competing with guys who then went on and drifted in Formula Drift. Like, that was who you were with, right? So you could be 2 days in and you could have Pat Sear on your door the whole time. Like, because there was no rules, it developed.
A very open skate park where you just kind of show up and, and look, we're not saying that's the best and safest way of doing things. I think a lot of us just kind of came up because, a lot of us grew up and we have no say in running these events. We're just showing up. And like the Nelson layout on Shannonville is like 4th, 5th gear. I kiss your life goodbye. But there we are, like idiots, go doing it. So I think that's just how it is. I think there's some parts where things are very strict. Like in New Jersey, where Club Loose is at, things are very strict because the state troopers dictate the rules that we have at the track. Every state has different rules and insurance requirements or whatever have you. I can only imagine that plays a role in Europe as well. But as soon as you said you guys had to go on big layouts, that changes like the momentum, that changes like the car setups. You don't really need a lot of Ackerman with those type of layouts. So I can see why WiseFab is so favored. Because when I look at like, I'm not a big fan of, when I say WiseFab, I mean like taking Ackerman out type of settings in cars. And like, so they kind of just flow freely. Whereas that doesn't really look like it works in American tracks because we don't have long layouts like you guys do. So I think that plays a huge role when it comes into that. You know what I mean? But then I also want to know, like, what type of influence did like Driftworks and like Garage D, because that was all Euro-based stuff that we saw. And I remember Phillips and all the dudes and Dan Chapman, all those dudes that would, that's the people when they drifted over at Wimbledon and they would do that little jump over that little bump in Wimbledon. Like, that's the stuff that we would see and be like, yo, I want to go do that. Again, a huge thing that I think you guys need to pay attention to in Europe is that as Americans, when we see videos, we're also looking at the scenery behind the event. And when that looks different from us, we're like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I want to go to Russia and go drift in Shohei with the with those buildings in the background just for street cred. You know what I mean? So we look at the background. Interesting. But Driftworks was huge. I remember they were huge. They had videos, Garage D, like that, and I think they had really style-driven cars. So I thought you guys were that. I thought that's the path that it was going to go. Again, I don't know their backstory or what has come about. Now we have drift games and all that. So there's a lot over there,
Yeah, but the cars that had a lot of style, at some point the direction European drifting took outgrew that. It was simply not possible anymore to run a very low car and be good enough, because I don't know how it's in the US, but in Europe it kind of works like this. Okay, you have a general setting that seems to work, right, on cars, and then just everyone adapts it, and that's your knowledge, and that's it. That is what you do. You do things like other people do them, and of course, resource-wise, that also makes sense. You kind of try to invent the wheel again and again and again, you burn a lot of your resources and energy, and you may never succeed with it. And if you have 4 practice laps before qualification, or it just doesn't make sense. So you rather be generic, do your thing, and try to get into the show. And that's I think European drifting forced drivers to be normal. I don't know. The normal is such a difficult world because what's normal, right? Yeah. But if you were different, you you were kind of cool, but you never made it very, very far because simply what you didn't work out for the competition, you know. And I think UK and again, UK drifting is something we all have been growing up with, and the style behind there, like low brain drifters, you know, where Luke Fink has been also like mega cool, man. But the only thing we have seen is him crashing the car. You know what I mean? Because he's like, he has been going so hard that it either worked or didn't. And that's something in European drifting that is not appreciated because, you know, first it's cool. People were like, hey, mega cool. He's doing all this crazy stuff. He's doing a lot of backward entries. But if that stopped you from going far in competition a few times in a row, then people were like, yeah, okay, it looks cool, but, you know, in the end, he's not good. Right. And he is good, and we know that. But, you know, that's what I mean. There's a lot of negativity, and I like when fans are really engaging, but we kind of allow just one way of drifting in Europe, you know, the correct way. You know what I mean? This is what it is.
Yeah. I think we have that too. There's people that think there's only one way of doing it, but you know, this is essentially a free world. We can all kind of take. That's what's beautiful about drifting is that we can all kind of look at it and kind of take what we get from it. I think what your influences are when you're receiving all the content are going to play a role in what you decide to be. You know, so whether it's in Europe or anywhere else, like it's definitely important to just allow there to be a lot of creativity and acceptance in all different types of stuff to kind of allow there to be room for the sport to grow, you know, and be unique in its own right.
I think resources kind of play a large part in this as well, right?
Huge role, yeah.
Within the US, like, I mean, for the longest time, you know, let's maybe focus in on angle, right? Like on angle kits in general. You basically had just cut knuckles, adapters. There was a couple of companies, right? That's how most guys started. And then obviously WiseFab comes in, changes the game. But once that happened, like once WiseFab really put its you know, hooks into drifting in the US, what, 6, 7 companies within 2 years just popped up. And some of them have done better than others. And some of them have, you know, progressed in very different chassis and things like that. But right now, like if I needed to, I could make a phone call and have 2 to 3 angle kits at my door within 48 hours, like without a problem, right? I mean, I could call friends, I could call, you know, different shops, and I would have it delivered to my house by Tuesday. So if I don't like something, or if I want to change something in my car, I just make a phone call, I just get online and it's there, you know, very, very quickly. And I have 5 to 6 different options to be able to test that out. And within those 5 to 6 options, I can call 10 different people who are going to give me setups for all of those options. So just same thing, like getting back to like the vast amount of resources, we have the ability to try so many different things. Same thing, I can go and test that at 5 different tracks at 5 different weeks. Hell, I could test it at 3 different tracks in the same weekend. Like it's not impossible to do that. So within the United States, you can develop and go down so many different paths so quickly and so attainably that there's no reason to just stick down one path. And ultimately, like a lot of people don't want to. Like I don't usually drift cars that everybody else drives. Like I've kind of just done that. That's just how I've been, where I don't want to drive something that everybody else has at the track. So I've invested and built really, really dumb cars. None of them are competitive. They were all terrible to drive. I look like an idiot driving all of them, but it was that like, holy shit, this guy's driving an 88 Thunderbird Turbo Coupe, which is something that nobody was drifting. I was one of probably 3 or 4 people in North America driving that car. But I could do that because it didn't matter. People were more excited to see a car that was very different and obscure, even if it drove absolutely terribly, because that was the culture.
And the culture here is we also have a chance that a lot of the conversations that happens with drivers are, you know, for the more advanced guys, it's like, oh, if I'm going to go do this event, I got a car for that. oh, if I'm going to go to this event, oh, I got a car for that. Depending what genre of drifting you're going to get into, there's some people that just have like different surfboards depending on what you decide to do that day. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I want to do this style event. Oh, I'm bringing out my S13 that has this, this, and this. Oh, I'm going to go compete at the Gambler. I'm going to bring out my VA car. Because like now you're showing up with the appropriate attire for that event. Like that's what exists here, you know, which is crazy to think that, but
that's not even like pro guys either. Like I know guys that have a very average income and a family that have 3 different drift cars, you know, a pro level car, let's say a pro spec or pro am level car, and then just a beater grassroots. I'm going to go bang doors with my friends, and they have all 3. So depending on where they're going that weekend, they just take the appropriate car. Yeah. I like that. They wear the right outfit. I like that.
Yeah, they wear the right outfit for the event. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not like that in Europe.
Yeah. But that's a space thing too, right? Like we have the space to have a garage that's got 4 or 5 cars in it. In Europe, to have a 3-car garage is like, that's, I mean, people are asking questions about where you got the money from.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So it's a money thing. I mean, it kind of developed into a thing where you have now a practice car.
Right.
That's something that has developed, I think, over the last 3 to 4 years.
C-time car.
Yes, and that is great. But finding a track that allows you to use that, very different story, especially Central Europe. Northern Europe, so like Finland, Sweden, Norway, different story. Because just way more land than people, you know. But like the kind of dense Central Europe, it's very tricky, noise regulations, pollution, you know. We all know the stories. But what I wanted to say about this performance thing, you said that, no, you didn't talk about performance, but I wanted to. So you talked about resources and able to get parts, right? That is the same in Europe. So, I mean, like, as we talked last episode, so Parts 33, you know, it's one of those shops that specializes in that. So it's very easy to get your parts and fast. That's not the problem. And that is thankfully to the performance-driven side of drifting, right? So because some companies like RiseUp started to push boundaries, you know, try to reinvent what's possible with a drift car, other companies came up with solutions. And that is great. That is the absolute positive side of that. So you have a vast variety of products to choose from now, depending what you like, depending what you don't like. So you can basically build a lot of different stuff, and that is cool. You know, that's why I'm talking negative about this performance side is wrong. You know, I don't want to be negative about it. I'm just saying that why it has to be always so black and white. You know, why it cannot be both. Why can we not find the middle ground? And it seems like in the US, you also didn't find a middle ground. You just have the ability to have everything coexisting. And that is, and that
not
is
peacefully.
No.
It maybe doesn't have to be like this, but we struggled so much in Europe to get to a point where we sell enough tickets to make it worthwhile for any organization to even do drifting events. You know, it just happened. We talked 2-3 years.
Yeah,
it didn't happen before. Like so many organizations have been formed and have been going into bankruptcy because it was simply not making any sense, you know, to continue. You just lost money, and so we just started like creating a market for drifting. You know, it just started happening. So maybe that's also a reason that coexistence, you know, is not really a thing yet. But I hope we can go in a direction where we can grow that culture. But again, and I'm not trying to think so often about it, but I talk a lot of people in the industry that are saying, yeah, hopefully politics is not kind of, you know, making a problem here. And I'm always trying to ignore that because I don't want it to be real, you know. I really hope we can move on and have 2-3 more decades of a really good time and build something great. But yeah, it feels like we are at the beginning of drifting, and that after 2 decades of drifting in Europe. It is super weird.
I wonder, so I never, so when you talked about like both things exist but not together, like honestly, it's kind of the first time I've really thought about it that way, because I think you're right in a lot of regards. There are very, very limited competitive series in drifting that highlights style as like the major thing, right? Like we talked about some of the team tandem things, which is fine. But like when we talk about a head to head, there really isn't one that I can think of. And Reese, but you've got a deeper knowledge than I do on this, but like where head to head competition is more based on style than anything else. And I'm curious if that is a judging thing, really, that like we've been so held to this is how you judge an event that we haven't developed it. FD added an X factor, which I think helped to some regard, but it was a bonus. It wasn't what it was about. It was just, you get a little bit more if you do something cool.
I think that, I think what allows there to be style is the canvas. And there's places like in Texas, I believe it's Knuckle Up. In Ohio, it's a street league from Drift Indy. In the West Coast, I know there's the Good Luck Drift League. These are all events where the layouts kind of set you up for that momentum-driven style, manage and scrub speed using calculated chucks and hucks, opposed to throttling up and just like using power drifting to get you through a corner. So that's very much going to dictate the end result. It's like it's like when you're cooking something, you start with ingredients. Well, the ingredients that a lot of these style driven events are doing is that they're like, okay, let's start from the beginning. We got to adjust the layout to fit more of what we're doing. Because I can't ask someone from Final Bout to go to Irwindale and wow us with that layout. That layout is not made for that type of style driving, in my opinion.
Yeah. There's one spot. There's one spot you can have style in
one
Irwindale.
spot that you can have style of.
Inner clip.
You know, and the only place I think, and this is just my opinion in FD, let's just say that we're taking someone out of their element to fit would be like St. Louis.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of momentum driven calculated spots where it allows for that stacking up stylistic dive. So it's, again, I think what they have figured out, and all the popular teams, like I say Knuckle Up in Texas, a huge group that was pushing this was Animal Style in the West Coast. Like they push this very driven sense of doing these layouts that promote that style. So it's like they go into thinking about these layouts beforehand so they can get the end result that they're looking for. Where if you look at the Pro-Am layouts, they don't promote that type of driving. Yeah, it's all speed it's just, and all that.
Yeah.
You know, I think style doesn't have to do with being reckless. You know, I'm not saying style is something that means you're not precise, but you just do it cooler. You know, it is.
Yeah.
It is harder. It is harder to drive with more style and still be very precise in what you need to do. Because if we talk tandems, if the lead car is not where it's supposed to be, you know, it makes it very, very hard for a chase car, and it will look stupid. But this doesn't mean that you cannot use a bit more momentum-driven style, you know, to just get where you have to be, and that has to be taught. You know, it has to be favored, or it has to be rewarded. You know, and that's just, as Reese just said, layouts are the biggest part here. You know, some venues just have a fixed layout that cannot be really changed much. You know, so yeah, what can you do? And what I don't like about it is that we just accept that,
right,
for fact. You know,
well, it's easy. It's easy to accept it. It's hard to push and change.
If it works, you know,
yeah.
The question really is there. Why should I change it? You know,
right.
And I get that from a business point of view, but I think we are kind of missing a few people that just say, "Hey, I just want this to be different," you know, and that is exactly what happened. What happened to Iron Drift King in the last 4 months? We're like, man, that is not who we want to be. You know, we want to be different. We want to push the boundaries. We want to do something new, and we want to make sure we we show drifting in a very different way, you know, and it's still drifting, it's still tandem, it's still freaking cool, you know. You will not see any, you know, you don't have to wave your hand out of the window while tandeming to get extra points or whatever. It's not about that. It's still classic drifting, but it's a new approach. And I think that is important. It's the same when that Dave Egan did, you know, many years and many times again, just reinventing what has been there, you know, and make it his own. And I always like that and I always appreciate it. And the negative side with everything you do when you try to accomplish those is you have to focus very much also on the financial side of it. Otherwise, it will have no future. You know, if financials wouldn't matter, man, we would be at a different point anywhere on the planet. You know, but you need to make sure that what you're doing is paying the bills at some point. Right?
I think that's a huge that's a huge thing. The financial thing is huge, and I think that's why in America you're seeing such a huge pushback on tires. I don't want to name those, but there's specific tire brands that are just way too grippy, and they are starting to take away from the aesthetic of what drifting was. And there's a lot of us that are now actively trying to run these 235 drifting competitions, because it allows more fluidity and it allows more style. Where I think, and the problem is, I think the ones that have figured out that that's not a good thing are maybe kind of making the switch. But then there's a lot of them that knowingly know that having these grippy tires is an advantage, and they don't want to let go because they know that's their only advantage. You know, and I think that's a reality. I think tires we need to stop. We're literally making tires now, or they're coming out with tires that can literally stop the Earth's rotation. It is ridiculous.
Yeah, right.
The only people that are making out are the tire companies, and the only people that are losing are us, the drivers. You know what I mean? So like, I'm a fan of anybody that's pushing lower tires and not allowing these low tread wears and stuff like that, because then it shows us, well, do you know how to set up your car? Do you know how to take side bite out? Do you know how to use forward bite? And to me, that's where the real education comes to play. But if you just have tires that are like 285s and they're tread wear 100 and they can like literally stop the Earth's rotation, then you don't need to make setting changes at all, because all you're doing is lowering and raising tire pressure, which in my book is very boring. You know what I mean? But then again, I come from a different upbringing. I come from not having the money to have all these grippy tires. So I would use shitty tires and then figure out how to make it work from a financial standpoint. You know what I mean? So I think that plays a huge role, is the financial part, and setting your drivers up for success, not setting up drivers for financial like misery.
I think this is like totally aside. I apologize for like hijacking this, but imagine a drifting series where it's all scrubs, where it's like they just go to like the local tire shop. They get all of the 18, you know, whatever they are. They could be, you know, 205s up to 235s or something, or even 195s. And it's just like, you don't know what tires you're getting, and everybody just like reaches into a pile, grabs some, and that's what you get. And you just use like scrubs. You only get a couple laps.
The dumpster dive championship, like your spotter goes and picks out 2 tires from the dumpster, and then you have to throw it on and then figure it out. Yeah.
Like, why not? Like, I mean, why not? Right? Like that's what I grew up with. Like I had buddies who worked at tire shop. My buddy Scott, like he worked at a tire shop, and he would just call me and be like, yo, dude, come get tires today. Like, we're going to throw all these out. There's a bunch here for you. I mean, I was running winter tires backwards. Like that was the thing. That was the thing to do in Canada.
Exactly.
Yeah. It was apparently in Europe too. You ran old winter tires. You ran them backwards. You filled them up to 60 PSI, and you just as much wheel speed as you could get out of them. And that was like, that was the only way to make smoke. And chunks of it were coming off. And
that's the culture we're talking about. Like having that culture where you're just trying to make it you're trying to make it figure it out. I think, as I tell anyone that asks similar questions, I think at the end of the day, you need to embrace the youth and whatever they think are cool, because in 10 years, they're the ones that are going to be in position making these calls anyway. Yeah. Everything that we see now that is cool came from a younger guy that did it. Like the East Coast drifting, for sure, at least in my Northeast region, was vastly affected by a small group of drivers from Front Street Drift Club that came out from New York.
Yeah.
because they were of the same age bracket. They were relatable to all these kids. They came up through that area, but they weren't us. These were people that were actually relatable to them. And I think that's what really changes. And now there's some of the most style drivers. I mean, we saw them in Canada. They did a really good job. They had these S13s, very Japanese influence, but had their own New York style. They talk very New Yorker. Like all of that plays a role, you know what I mean? And allowing that to embracing that and giving it the stage sometimes allows style, at least in my opinion, to kind of start coming in and let it be a normality.
Yeah, I think it sounds weird to say. We're all in our 30s or above, but like it's weird. I mean, I've got a 10-year-old who has slang and terms and things that he's into where I'm like, that's so dumb. Like my son has a mullet. Like, I mean, he plays hockey. So like the hockey mullet's always been a thing. But like in his school, the cool kids have mullets. They wear ridiculous sunglasses. He wears like a pink trucker cap. And I'm like, man, if I wore that in high school, I'd get my ass kicked. But like, that's the style now. And I have two options. I can make fun of him and be like, oh, that's silly, or understand that like, no, that's what's cool right now. And if I personally, or what I do for a living wants to be up with those times and reach that group of people, I have to accept the fact that what they're doing is not something I did, but that's what is the next thing. So like you said, Reese, is like, we do need to look at what 14, 15, 16-year-olds are into right now, understand that that's what is going to continue on and embrace that now or get left behind. That's really what it is.
For sure. That is 100% a thing. I'll give you another example. I have never been about Hoonigan. It's never been my thing. It's not my style. It's never have been.
Mm-hmm. But
they played a huge role in American drifting.
Yeah.
Huge. So I'm only using that as an example to say brands and what the culture is having exist over in Europe, I'm assuming plays a role as well. I don't know what brands are really pushing out there when it comes to drifting. I can only assume there's something out there. You know what I mean? Like that plays a role too, because
you can assume that, but it's not true.
Well, yeah. But so it just to tell people like I don't know if that's a market or not, but I mean like that pushes the culture. Music pushes the culture. Like back in the day, you used to only see videos that were playing Linkin Park, and now like you see more hip hop videos or rap videos more than anything else. Like it's a lot EDM of things that EDM for a while, like all of the things that are going on in our life in that time, it plays a role in drifting. It kind of shapes, at least for us, it shaped what we were seeing in drifting. You know what I mean? Like I don't see the cars that I like, big wheels and big lip wheels and all that crazy stuff from back in the day. I don't see that anymore. So I want to go buy a set of, I'm not going to say what wheels I want to buy because I don't want nobody to go beat me to it, but there's a certain pair of wheels that I want to go buy and then start using them again, because the nostalgia of pulling up and having your S13 with big lipped wheels and stuff like that, like it reminds you of what it was back in like 05, 06, 07 when you're going to like the auto saloon shows and seeing all these Japanese cars and Signal Auto and stuff like that.
But do you just want to travel back in time because it reminds you of an easier time? Or do you know, it's a legit question, right? Like we're in an age where sometimes I'm not so sure anymore. Do I just like that because it was easier, you know, and it felt a bit more hustle-free, you know, less responsibilities? Or do I really like it? You know, it is not easy when you have kids, you're married, you have so many additional responsibilities, and then you want to be this free spirit, you know, and pushing boundaries and creating fantastic moments for everyone else. And it's a very difficult combination, I think. And that's why I'm asking the question. Like, is it really something you enjoy more and you don't enjoy what's right now?
It allows us. We have, because we have so many different cultures, like, and we have so many different subcultures, it allows us to, I'm going to get into that. Like, it's okay. Yeah. Where it may be harder somewhere else, but if I want to get into that style stuff again, like when I first got into drifting, like I know where I can go do that, and I'll be accepted, and it'll be nothing but love, and it'll be like, oh, that's cool. I saw what you're doing over there. But you know, there's a place, there's a clan, there's a cult for me to go to be a part of. So it makes that transition at least for me and here, and I'm assuming for most people in America or in North America, a lot easier to do that.
I was once told that nostalgia is the world's strongest drug. And I very much like believe that, as somebody who literally went out and bought the car that I had at 18, like this year. Like I like, you know, small story on my end. Like I had kids very early, right? Like I've got a 10-year-old, I'm 33, should give you an idea. Like I didn't get a 20s. I spent my 20s working to support a family. I never got to live the 20s life, right? Like I didn't do that. I didn't have a choice. So for me, like buying the car that I gave up to raise my kid, like that is nostalgia. That is me trying to relive a time that in my case, I didn't get to live, but for a lot of people is the best time of their life, which is the 20s, like their 20s, sorry, not like the 1920s.
Right.
So yeah, I do think, like, to answer your question, Marcel, like for me, if I look at the car that I bought, it's a really stupid car to drive. It's not great. It's bouncy. You know, it doesn't even have like really, like it doesn't have remote entry. Like it doesn't have all the cool shit that I would actually like to have in a car now that I'm in my 30s, but I bought it for that feeling. So I think in the same way that there is still like heritage racing, you can go out and watch guys race, you know, people racing horses, right? Like that's not the best racing, but people still do it because they love it, and it's you know, it's old racing or vintage motorcycles or whatever. I don't think any of that stuff will ever disappear, and I think there's a place for it. But in order for a sport to move ahead, they have to do something similar. Looking at F1, the V12, the V10 era arguably was one of the coolest eras of F1, right? But for that, the sport has to continue on. In order to get the corporate sponsorship, they had to move into a hybrid era because that's where the money was. That's where the development was. That's where, you know, my son's bugging me to get an electric car because he's like, why do we have this? We should get an electric car. Like, that's what makes sense, right? That's a whole other argument. I don't even want to get into.
Sorry to hear that.
But that's his age group, right? Like that's the culture he's being raised in, is like, this is the vehicle you need to get. So I think within drifting, to bring it all back around, we will always have nostalgic drifting. We will always have the J style, the Japanese style. We'll find people with the last, you know, AE86s in existence tandeming together. But in order for the sport to progress, we do have to look forward. We have to figure that out. There's going to be a trickle down, right? Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but like we have to look at what's coming next in order for the sport to grow, so we can still have the nostalgia to go back to.
Agreed.
Like, you know, when you were saying that, I was kind of thinking, at which point do we know that we succeeded in you know, in driving something forward and creating progress? Like for me over in Europe, you know, for me it's like, okay, as soon as events are sustainable, people are ready to buy tickets, you know, to see the sport, and as soon as teams are running a sustainable program, you know, where they can really finance themselves doing what they're doing instead of selling their house in order to do it, that would be that point. But I was thinking already earlier, Reese, when you were saying that you have so many coexisting, you know, kind of ways of drifting in the US. Are they all like financially kind of stable?
No, sir.
No.
It depends who you are.
Mm-hmm.
It depends who you are. If you're someone that is a go-getter, again, it's an open canvas. If you are someone, let's use Jimmy Oakes. All right, Jimmy Oakes. We don't know him as a competition drifter, but due to the way he went about his career through social media, he is able to now focus on this style-driven type of this world, right? Because he's also part of Front Street as well, and he drives with those kids from New York. So he uses that opportunity to create content to then help what he's already put in motion. You know what I mean? So he figured out a way to do that, as we all do I'm assuming in America. You know, we all do that. You know, in North America, we all try to figure out a way to incorporate what we're already doing. And there's some people that, yes, can make a living off of it because they're doing like that other YouTube or TikTok or whatever world. and they kind of make it happen. For example, I have a drifting school, but my drifting school really is only popular because I use social media to help motivate that and fuel that. So that's more of what you'll see. And then you'll see other people that are just, again, I won't say who they are, but they're very financially well off. They made really good financial decisions. They have amazing jobs, and they can afford to have these really cool hobbies, so they don't have to worry about becoming a professional drifter or doing all that. They're like, dude, I'm going to do it this way and have gnarly car and the most limited JDM stuff simply because they can. So that, again, it goes to like, it's just so vast here, and we're very jaded. And I don't think a lot of us really know how good we really have it currently right now.
The financial concern that you brought up, Marcel, is not just a European thing. I think so. A couple of comparisons that we can talk about. Jimmy Oakes probably has more funding than the bottom 10 drivers in FD. I mean, we can go through the list of like YouTube influencers. TJ Hunt probably has more money than and funding than almost everybody in Formula Drift, right? Mm-hmm. And he's not considered a competition level drifter. The people who are going broke or have gone broke because of high level drifting, just in America, is very, very long. I don't want to get into names. I know personally a dozen drivers that financially are going to be recovering from high level drifting for the rest of their lives, just because they thought that was it. They thought that was all of it. And that discussion about how do we make this sport sustainable where everybody can have money and all that stuff is something that's been going on forever. And you can look at a ton of other motorsports and it's the exact same. Like, I think it was Liam Lawson from F1 that had a conversation where he talked about, he's like, I was broke. Like I had no money until I actually made it into F1, like until I made it to the top levels. So I don't think it's just a European issue. I don't think it's just a drifting issue. I think it's just a high level anything issue.
Definitely. But I think what the examples that Reese gave of these guys, who made it through a different channel, into a position where they can get better driving because they can afford to spend the time and the money on it. We're back at the thing where we say, if we allow style to play a bigger role, if we encourage their own personalities, I'm not saying just on track, I'm mostly talking off track, I think they will come up with ways to support what they're doing. I'm not saying every competition and championship has to pay for those drivers, but it has to allow the possibility for them to grow into a brand that is strong enough to support itself. That is basically what I mean. And that's something we're doing, with our drivers this year. It's like helping them getting to a point where they can support themselves, or at least getting in that direction. Is
it an education thing? Like for me, like there's a drift series that I've attended quite a lot where like as somebody who works in marketing, I make a point to talk to as many drivers about their marketing. And a lot of them don't understand how to do it. I literally this week, for a driver, I calculated that if they sold every social media post for a year, right? Like if they went to all their sponsors, sold every single post, each post only really costs the brand a couple $100, right? That driver profit would make over $180,000 just in profit. And they're not big. They've got 20,000 followers, which is a lot. Don't get me wrong, but they're not an Adam LZ. They don't have a million followers. They have a decent amount for a pro level driver, but yeah, they could make $180,000 in pure profit just by selling their social media. And they had no idea.
And here we are, why it is an educational thing. You are in a position to see opportunities, right? You look at something and you're like, okay, I think I can do that.
I can sell that.
Me too. But I had to learn that. I was not born into that. I come from a totally working class family. I was taught, be safe, build a very safe and stable life. And that's it, right? Never think outside of the box because it seemed dangerous. So I had to grow into a position where I can look at things and see the possibilities and opportunities and not being lazy to take them. Because I think laziness and being scared, are the reasons why people don't take chances and opportunities. But what they don't realize is they take a lot of chances not taking those chances. They continue to fund with their own cash and with cash of family and friends. They continue to fund a program.
Yeah.
That is the biggest risk you can ever do if you don't do it right. You have almost zero chance of getting any return on your investment. So I think if we show them a few ways, and push them, and I'm not talking about what we did now, but we did something where we pushed drivers, gave them a very short time frame to create something. Okay. We spent, I don't know, between 3 to 8 hours per day on our phones, and but we use this just to consume. We don't use this to do something productive. Yeah. And at least the majority of people. So what we did now is like we pushed them and said, okay, here's the deadline, do that. And I can tell you the results are incredible.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. Creativity out of your own style, your own character, all that. It is so cool if you watch what has been created, and it's fantastic. Every one of those things that have been created, okay, are different, and that's great, and that's what we need, right? But you need to push them a little bit in that direction.
What kind of events do you guys have there? All right, so in America we have Hyperfest, we have Grid Life, we have Fuel Fest, we have a lot of these spectator-driven events.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of events that I can go to promote my brand as a driver that has nothing to do with competition. And I almost would argue to think that the interaction is better than going to some comp events. I can tell you, if you come to America, and I'm talking FD, right? But if we step outside of FD and we go to every other competition that exists, not everyone, but for the majority, you look in those stands when those competitions are going and it's crickets. But if you go to like an actual festival, or you go to like some crazy bash, there's way more people. So do you guys have that over there? And if not, don't you think it would be better to maybe start having more of those festival style events to then give the opportunity for the content to be more organic? What I mean by organic, I mean fun related. And then the drivers don't have to be so serious about results because they're only worried about getting the cool shot or whatever they think is going to do good content wise, which kind of allows them to practice. So when they go to the competition, this isn't something new or weird for them. This is something that they've already been doing in a fun setting.
We kind of have that in Europe. It's Gettins, is I think the most famous for that, or the only one. I don't know. I think it's the only organization that.
How many times does it happen?
4.
Oh, it happens 4 times a year. Yeah, and it does since a decade.
I've been to
more than a decade.
I've been to almost all of the Grid Lives, and I've been to one Gettins so far. 1 or 2? One for sure. And it is very similar. I believe someone's gonna screw me over on this one, but like I believe Gettins was around before Grid Life was. I could be wrong on that though.
I believe that. I think it's already 12 or 14 years into it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how long Grid Life is around, but
I think 10 for sure. So
that's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah, dude, you have to you've got to go out to it. It is very, very interesting.
It's wild, right?
It is
wild. And that's that's why we call our tickets festival tickets in the Iron Drift King, because that is the atmosphere we want to provide. Yeah, we do not have the track time to just let guys just get loose, So it is of course a competition. Also, we wanted to combine the coolness of a festival, the atmosphere of a festival, with a professional aspect in drifting. With a professional high quality and high level competition. Whereas Gettins, they also do have competitions, but I think it's way more, it's driven to just entertain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So they have also zones and stuff, but they also have this. How do they call that? I have been competing myself or driving myself in two Gatebull in Rudskogen in Norway, and you have to drive with three cars also. I don't know if they don't call it the threesome competition because we called it that, but I don't know what they called it, and that was cool. That was really cool.
Essentially they've got two different competitions. One is that big corner, big angle, big smoke, that kind of thing, and then they do a 3-car tandem. I can't remember what it's called. I mean, it's got a Norwegian name, I believe, or a Polish name.
I think Preisladen or something.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
But it's similar, like to almost like not animal style event, but like that 3 cars tandem as close as you can get. And then that same big corner. So you have just really one corner, you have to nail it. But like they're expecting you to be like wheel on door, 3 cars stacked the whole time. Like it's a really, really tight competition. So
I didn't know there was competitions. The only thing I thought it was like a grid life type of thing that was going on over there. And the one thing we all remember is Osbo slaloming through these cars. And like, that's the one thing that we're like, oh, I guess this is just a place that you can get gnarly. That's literally what we thought. We had no idea there was a comp or anything. Like,
there's that.
Or at least I didn't.
You can. They actually have a lot of rules. This is weird because, me driving there, I have been invited. That was great. And because when you're invited, you get a different set of stickers on your windshield that allows you to even drift in the track, like the circuit car groups, and you're usually not allowed to do that. So that was really cool. But it's very sketchy, man. You have like 160 cars in the same moment on that circuit.
I'm down.
Some better, some worse, some crazy stuff, and everyone is just trying to create the most amount of smoke, most wheel speed, biggest angle, just go nuts. But they're very strict on like kind of flags and stuff, and you have to go through kind of a training. So you have a sticker on your windshield with like 3, what is like squares, and you get a lot of black flags. You get a lot of black flags for whatever you just did. You don't even mostly know why it happened. And they get you out, and then they take their marker, and you get a cross. And if you have 3 crosses, you don't go back on that track on that day. So they try to keep it somehow in control. But we all know the videos. The guys shredding along the start finish line, and we are talking 200 kilometers per hour. So what's that? 130 miles? 100 something like this.
That's fast.
Yeah. So it is fast. Yeah. So,
but they also have like a sound ordinance. You can only go a certain decibels. Like it's so strange.
What?
Like it's really strange how it is, as you said, like very, very strict, but also incredibly wild at the same time. So it's also where I found out that like the Finnish people will party until dawn and then go to bed. But then they have like breathalyzers trackside the next morning to like check all the drivers. Like you have to go for a breathalyzer before you get back in the car the next day. Yeah.
What?
So it's a really interesting mix of insanity, but also very tight regulations. So
I just think every time I go to Europe, I'm just going to see a whole bunch of Vikings just drifting or something. Like it's.
No, I think that's just what you wish for.
Yeah.
That's probably what I wish for. Like I just want everyone to just be like, you know what I mean? Like,
I mean, you will see them because alcohol plays a big part, right? Not while driving, obviously, as we just talked, but like especially in Northern Europe, citizens let loose as soon as they drink, and I mean let loose.
Yeah.
So you're in for a good time, definitely.
Yeah. I don't drinks, but I'll be sober to see everything. So
that's what I meant. That's what I meant.
It's almost better that way, just so you can like absorb. Like I'm not a big drinker either, but like to be able to like sit and absorb everything that's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's wild. I think that shows though that like there is an appetite within Europe for that style and like that craziness, and I
100%.
do think it can exist. It's just, as we've talked about, like it hasn't been pushed or promoted, or only 1 or 2 small groups have kind of had the balls to to try it and do it because there is such a risk, right? Like you said.
Can I quickly ask, in which state grid life is happening?
Michigan is the main one.
Michigan, Connecticut, Georgia,
South
California,
Carolina.
South Carolina.
Yeah, they just did one in California.
I just realized when you started answering, it doesn't matter to me actually where, because my actual question is, what is the population of those states?
Oh, they're all huge.
Yeah, they're all huge.
And define huge.
Several million in each one. Like, I mean, we could look up Michigan, but I mean,
geographically, they're close to, like the one in Connecticut, you're going to get New Yorkers, you're going to get people from Boston. They're geographically placed in areas where the metropolitan, whether they're big or small, are going to gravitate to. At least that's how it looks like here.
There's cities with I would say 5 million people or more within like a 3 to 4 hour drive.
And we have, where Gettins is happening, we talk countries with 5 million people. You know, that is where I wanted to get at actually. The issue we are having is getting people to travel for those things, you know?
So I think, like, on that note, if you go and watch content around grid life and around like some of these festivals, like if you go watch videos of it, you will find that a lot of people document that travel. And like the idea of like an American road trip is such a staple in American culture. And I think it's just because of the amount of travel that Americans have to do. Like, I mean, Canada in particular, like, I don't measure in distance, I measure in time. Like when I talk about going to visit my mom, I know how many kilometers it is. Yeah. I know it's 450 kilometers to get to my mom's house, but it's not. It's 5.5 hours drive. I don't tell anybody 450 kilometers. I tell them how many hours. So, which, speaking like a lot with Europeans, like it's more about the kilometers than it is about the time. So I think finding a way to like make the journey a part of the entire festival is so much of it.
This happened, and it was sparked in the UK. It was called Road to Gateville. And you can actually, I think you find videos on YouTube about it. So it was, you know, Garage D, you know, Driftworks, those guys actually initiated it as far as I remember correctly. And it was about bring cool people, you know, some Monster Energy athletes, you know, you had, I don't know if you Shane Lynch, Batsy Butler, you know, guys that got paid to have a freaky time and still do, most of them. And they just got in cool cars that were definitely not legal, you know, throughout Europe, but they anyhow did, you know, and they documented it. And that Gateville was always a very and still is, I think, for a lot of people, a very magical place. Because it seemed like outlaw country, you know? It's not at all. But as a visitor, as a spectator, you don't feel that. Okay, there's people coming with, what are you calling it? Like a coach, like a travel bus? Yeah. You know, like a big bus, like 50-seater like buses. A Greyhound. Yeah. And exactly. And the only reason they are coming with a bus is not because there are 50 people. No, that bus is created as it's reconfigured, rebuilt as an RV, you know, for the only purpose is to drive to Gettins with it. Yeah. Okay. And there's lots of those people that buy themselves a big bus, you know, just to go to Gettins and hammer themselves.
Yeah, they should document all of that, like why they bought that, why they got the coach, the whole trip, like that all should be documented. Yeah.
Reese, I'll send you a video of Simon Olsen loading his Supra in the back of a bus. Like that's yeah, and it's like it's not in the lower half either; it's in the upper half. Like they're driving it up 5-foot ramps into the back of a bus, and he's not the only one. Like no, you don't find truck and trailers. Those guys. Yes, yeah, a lot of these guys do it.
You just recently had the Up in Smoke tour that just happened in Europe that
Chelsea's praising.
Chelsea's is talking about, and Russo has showed me, and that was cool because it was a bunch of people that were traveling around Europe. They went to Spain, they went to like a bunch of places around Europe. I don't know them all. Yeah. And they were just like documenting their trip to, it was kind of like Drift Week, but for Europe. It was like the Euro trip. You know what I mean? And like, that was cool because I didn't know any of those dudes or anything like that. You know what I mean? So it was cool to kind of see the personality. I almost didn't care about the driving. The driving was like, oh, they're driving. But it's like through those videos, you got to see the personalities. And I think ultimately that's what really like the hook, line, and sinker is for people, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
This is what it's all about. It's just about personality.
Mhm.
And that is, and now, I know I repeat myself, but I want to repeat myself in order to get people to listen to this and understand. If we embrace the personalities of the drivers that we have, those incredible guys that are ready to invest absolutely everything they have to give people a good time, we will create stronger brands automatically, So let's encourage that and give those guys the chance to be themselves. Of course there will be rules, totally normal. You have to control some, at least in the competition, you have to control it, but let them build fans, that like those guys for what they are and not just for how many points they scored or how many battles they won.
Yeah, I think that's the crux of all of this, and
Mhm.
I mean, it's allowing somebody to show people who then become fans who they are, but then you also have to have the things to do that, right? Like you have to produce content, you have to make media, you have to post on socials, like that's the only way. And like it's not this is same thing. It's not just a European problem. This is a Japanese drifting problem as well. I've had many talks with people that come from Japanese drifting over to America. They say the same thing, that like these guys aren't getting sponsors because they just don't post anything. They don't, they're not sharing with the world who they are. So no one's interested in who they are. You can't grow that way. Like if you want the money, if you want the funding, if you want the fame, if you want any of it, people have to find you. And if you're not doing anything for people to find you, the chances are so slim. Like it's just so slim.
It was very easy for us back in the day to, I got into a magazine, or I got into Rec magazine, which was a website magazine, or the actual magazines like Super Street and all that. It was very easy for you to be an introvert and then make it big in that world, because you didn't really have to interact with a lot of people. With the way the world is now, you kind of almost have to lean on the extrovert side and really be more of a showman on top of everything in order to really make it. If you don't want to be like that, and you want to be popular for solely just drifting and driving, well, my friend, you better be like the most impactful drifter that this world has ever seen. You know what I mean? Because for instance, right, a perfect example is Julian Jacobs, which is the guy that we all know from Animal Style. A lot of people may not know him personally, and neither do I. But when Julian Jacobs goes and drives, I guarantee you half the people are going to stop and watch. So unless you have that type of pull from being an amazing driver, which he is in his lane, in his style driving, like that's what you need. But if you're just out there drifting, well, welcome to the club. Everybody can drift.
Yeah.
Like everybody can do that. So what makes you so different? You have to be someone that stands out. And I use Julian because whether he's in his heyday or he was, the moment you saw videos of him driving, people watched because they wanted to see him drive. So unless you have that type of pull, well, you're going to have to put the personality cap on and like show people that you are more than just a drifter. Not everybody's going to be like him, or like, let's say Chelsea on the other end, where they almost don't even want to see how he is personally, even though people like how he is. They want to see his crazy driving. You know what I mean? Like, so you have to be of that caliber of an impactful driver if driving is going to be the only thing you show publicly. You know what I mean? Like, people know me, but they don't know me for my driving. They know me for a cusp of things. You know what I mean? So
They
it's
know
like,
you for your personality, Reese.
so it's like, it's that's the reality of what you gotta go with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think James Dean's a good example of that. Like for years, James really didn't have a great social media presence. It's gotten a lot better now. I mean, he produces a lot more content now, but like in his heyday, I mean, it was Piotr that was documenting, his James's 3 championships. It wasn't James documenting it, but his driving was so good that it didn't matter, right?
And that's the thing. That's the thing. Exactly. His results spoke for him,
Right.
And that was I have been driving with James for a few years, in the same championship, and man, when you had him, you couldn't even appreciate the fact that he was your battle partner. You couldn't. You were just like, Okay, and that's where my weekend ends. That was this is how strong. This is how strong he was.
Yeah.
Like he dominated so hard, absolutely crazy. And the reason that he is that good, one of them, in my opinion, is that he has been going so far in every competition. Not calling it winning because he actually did win everything all the time. That he got so much more seat time during the competition than most of the guys, and that is just snowballing into an advantage in seat time and experience that you just cannot compensate with your little practice that you have. Yeah. And but yes, so to come back to publicity and marketing, really, James was just that crazy good that you had to know him, and people appreciated him for that. I have just seen a video 4 days ago where someone was saying, did James get worse? That's the title of the video. Someone analyzing, is James going backwards in his skill set?
That's such a backhand compliment.
Yeah, because he didn't dominate. Yeah, because he didn't dominate a championship. Yeah. We think that like something's, and I mean, I said it too. I was one of those people who said like this was the first year in a long time that we saw James Dean not dominate. Like he spun out in Long Beach. Like it was the first time he spun out in competition in like 10 years. Like everyone's like, what the hell just happened? But like, then you look back and like, a brand new car in a chassis he's never drifted before that's been modified to the wrong side. Like, and he still came 5th, I think, overall. Like,
no need for explanation, Yeah. It's like just people are like, this is what people started liking about him, like 10 years ago. And people expect him to be great all the time. And that's a lot of pressure for him, definitely. And that's not always fun. But it's the same like a content creator that is good in this side, has the pressure of always coming up with new stuff, showing new things, and creating more and more content. I think it's the same world, just different.
Yeah.
I think another good example of that would be, I don't know if you guys know Drift Squid.
Yep.
Yes.
I know Drift Squid.
That dude has been putting in so much time. I think he's an amazing driver. He pushes the RBs. He had this whole style thing back in the day with the team and does all this stuff. And like, he was before his time. There was documentaries where he was saying he put out money to make these crazy toge videos and nothing came of it, but he stuck with it. And I don't know, I haven't spoke to him, nor do I know him like that, but I appreciate what I see him do as a fan. And I think he's big now with Sideways Drift Experience in Japan and doing all this crazy content of like ride-alongs and stuff like that. And that just goes to show you, like, there is also an amazing driver in a different genre that now is starting to break out. But I don't think he was one of the drivers that got the cred that he needed or that he deserved. I've known about the Drift Squid for a while, but I think now just more and more people are starting to realize who he is. And it just shows as an example, that's because of social media. He's been an OG for a long time. And I just wanted to
say, it kind of sounded now like that he's the up and coming guy. Now that guy is doing this for over a decade.
Yeah.
But more people know him now because of all the social media and the TikToks and the Sideways Drift Experience content that I've seen. So some people are like, who's this new guy? I'm like, yo, Jake has been here forever.
Yeah.
That dude's a ripper. But you now know of him because of that outlet of social media.
I think the best example, in my opinion, of somebody who kind of looked at like the way that US drifting was going and adapted within Europe is the Black Smoke Racing team, because they did something, in America, like diesel drift cars are just not a thing. If you have a diesel drift car, you are one of what do you think, Reese? 100 guys in the US who are actively drifting diesels. In Europe, it's fairly common, but it's
not, Jacob. It's not.
What?
Not social media makes it look that way.
It's not common, no.
But it's still significantly more common in Europe than it is in the US. Like even in the time that I've been. Oh yeah. Because you guys have 5,
I think.
I don't know. When I was at Gattville, there was like 10 of them. Whereas like I've only seen 3 in my entire time traveling drifting within the US. I've only seen 3 diesel drift cars, and I owned one of them. And the other one was a buddy of mine.
There's a reason for that.
I know, they're terrible drift cars. But like,
No.
but those guys on Black Smoke Racing have done a really good job of branding and marketing and having merch and producing content, doing ridiculous stuff. Like, but at the cost of not having a high level competitive car. That car is incredible. They've done incredible
Exactly.
things, but it is not as competitive as if they put the same chassis with a 2J in it.
Do you know why he has such a strong fan base?
I actually
do you know
don't
what
know.
he did? Like, look, making that kind of car reliable with a lot of horsepower, making that kind of engine setup reliable is almost impossible, right?
Right.
And he has been going through maybe 100 engines in the last decade. And
One of them
I mean
at
that.
one of them at
Exactly,
last year.
at the Iron Drift King last year, you know, and it's going to continue to happen because if you
Yeah.
push 5.5 bar boost, you know, I don't even know how many 1,000 psi this is, you know.
I was about to say 5.5.
You know?
Jesus.
So
50. Yeah, you're on 100 psi. Yeah.
yeah, so what he did is basically he broke a lot of his stuff. You know, he was on track. He had that black smoke. He had a lot of tire smoke. He had a lot of power. Boom, broken. And what he did in his red, he had a dark red racing suit. You know, in this suit with a cigarette in his mouth, he was laying in the oil under the car. Basically, they like broke 3 engines every goddamn weekend. You know, and people, because I had my paddock next to his. And there's standing like 300 people around them when they repair that kind of setup, you know, night after night after night. And he's standing there with this oil-soaked racing suit, you know, and his signature cigarette in his mouth, and he like ain't care, you know. That is how he has been growing. Because I think people just envied someone who doesn't care. You know, it's so difficult to not care, and he just didn't. And I
Right.
think he still doesn't. And he's a businessman. You know, he's successful. Like he has a very good program. You know, and he understood the marketing side of it. And when you see him driving, it doesn't matter if he loses or wins. You know, he's always putting on a show. He understood people like that, and I think he also likes to give that to people, to provide them with a fantastic show. But he has been true to himself, and that is a very hard and long road.
Mhm.
I think you just answered everything. Yeah. You just answered how people should be right there. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can point to so many drivers like that. And I mean, in the US side, you know, coming from Europe, who figured it out is Federico Sciarrifo. Like, is that Ferrari competitive? My opinion, not really. It's just not. It's not built to do that. There's no research on it. He's developing everything. Everything's expensive, but people love him because he's 100% authentic Italian. He doesn't hold anything back. He like, as terrible of a situation it was when that car caught fire in Long Beach, and he's doing the Italian hands at the Ferrari on fire. That was it. That moment exploded his career in the general drifting knowledge. If you knew who he was before, you know, coming out of Japan, doing everything he did in Japan, you already knew that this guy can shred. He comes over to America. One of his first times on track, his Ferrari catches fire and he's going full Italian. You're like, I need to know more about this guy. Like,
and
it worked perfectly.
If you do research on him, like I tell people, like, again, there's been times that people just, who's this Italian guy? I'm like, first of all, he isn't new. First of all, he's been around since like Team Orange and everything.
Just back he drove Team Orange, right?
Yeah, he did all this. But again, the beauty about our current generation and our current situation is, as fast as we consume information, we also forget about it. So like, if you don't know about Federico and like the heritage and the cool factor that he brings, you know what I mean? But what does everybody know him for? For being an Italian, and he goes and he does all the hand movements. And, you know, I hung out with him recently in Italy, and he's now, you know why people like him, because we have a stereotypical way of thinking about Italians, and he kind of plays into it a little bit, and it works. It works fantastically.
Why not? You know, why not?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I play into being Canadian. Reese, you played, being Philadelphian, like
Did the T, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Marcel, I mean, we know you're German. Like, why not?
Yeah,
right?
for
Like,
sure.
That's the thing. Like, if you have that as a personality, if there's something you can latch onto, then do it. And I think that goes out to all the drifters. I mean, a good example, I talk about him probably way too much, is like a Jonathan Hurst, who like, he just latched onto the fact he's like, I'm a good old Southern boy. I'm from Kentucky. I'm bootstrapping this.
Is he the guy with the cowboy hat?
No,
that's John Barrion.
Yeah, he's actually from Brazil.
No, that's not the one I mean. But is it the one with the Cadillac, Jonathan Hurst?
No, that's Taylor Hall. But that's another guy
that's another guy. Yeah, that's another guy.
That's another guy that's leaned into being like the true Southern American, right?
Yeah.
Like, you just lean into what you are, be true to yourself, right? Like, I'm definitely Canadian. But I push it maybe a little bit more, right? Like, I add 10% to how Canadian I am on camera, on mic, on whatever, to push that as the brand. And I think, for any of these drivers trying to push themselves, it's like, just add 10% to who you are. Don't be fake, but you have to add a little bit more and lean into that personality. And that's what people are going to attach to, right? Like,
I agree.
Yeah.
You talk to any of
100%.
these guys that you see on the internet, and you meet them in person, you're like, oh, you're the same guy. You're just a little bit more on camera because you kind of have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
that's literally how that all goes. Another person who does a really good job is Nate Chen. In my opinion, he's a pro spec driver. And I like how he just took this whole, I'm Asian, I'm pretty sure he's mixed, but like, he just puts on this whole outfit, like the yellow Bruce Lee Game of Death outfit.
Yeah.
And he just ran with it. And I thought it was so cool. And then he does these halftime shows, and he's very smart, and he comes from a certain demographic in like Washington, DC type stuff. And like,
very educated.
He's owning, very educated. Like, he's with it. You know what I mean? He's one of those kids, because he came up as a media guy. Mm-hmm. And then he's one of those guys that I think heard everyone say, yeah, you should really go to school and like figure this out. Now he comes in, he can afford it. He can do all this stuff. He has another RX-7 that he drives, and he just feeds into his personality. And I think he's really grown into his own individual in the last like 2 years that I've seen him come in. Because it takes a lot to go up there and do these halftime shows and get on the mic and stuff like that. And he's all in, you know what I mean? And I hope people look at that and be like, coming out of my shell kind of helps out a lot. And I can only assume that's helping out his program. I can only assume, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think if you like to talk, it always starts with liking to hear yourself talking. That sounds kind of narcissistic maybe, but it's like you have to enjoy yourself in order to, be confident to present yourself to the world. And so if you're cool with who you are, then other people will also like that, because it has nothing to do with arrogancy or anything. It's very much just, hey, I know who I am, and I'm showing to you who I am. So you have the chance to get to know me, and that's a great thing.
I think
it's the secondhand confidence that you get from someone like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can do that being quiet though. Like, look at like a Kimi Räikkönen, right? Like that's a guy who is known for not having a personality, right? Like his entire Look, he has a personality.
Living in Finland, I can see that from a very different point of view, because now being here since 13 years, so I know the culture, I respect the culture a lot. And he doesn't speak much, but this is exactly what it's all about. He doesn't speak because he doesn't see the need, and that's why people like him. Mm-hmm. Because he is just like, nah, not my thing. I'm not doing it, and that's it. And if he is a little bit tipsy at some prize giving ceremony thing, I'm not going to say that alcohol is cool, but I'm saying that he just doesn't care.
Yeah,
he wanted to have a few drinks. They were available, so he has been having a few drinks. And most of those guys, Valtteri Bottas, the same thing. Most of the videos you see is him with his personal trainer sitting in the sauna having a freaking Finnish beer, and that's how they present themselves. It's like, I'm a human, and I am who I am, and you deal with it. And this is in my opinion, he doesn't show much, or doesn't. Is Reese still here?
I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I can still hear you. Let me just see
It's
what's
all-
up with the camera.
Okay.
I
So
think you
sorry.
lost the battery again. It's all good.
So do we continue?
I'll put in a bad drawing of him. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're good. We're good.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. So he doesn't talk about his personality, but he kind of shows. He shows who he is by not showing. Do you know what I mean? Like he doesn't see the need. So he's very sure of himself, obviously.
Yeah,
and
I think
that's a Finnish thing. I can tell you that.
I think what it comes down to, and I think to kind of like, wrap all of it up is when we talk about like style and differences in drifting and everything else, is like you have to display it in some way, whatever that is. You have to be authentic to yourself, maybe plus a little bit more, but then you have to have a way of showing the world what that is and not being afraid to show the world what that is. And I think that's maybe what the biggest difference is in my eyes between Europe and North American drifting in general, is that the North Americans are not afraid to show off who they are. They don't have any concern, and they very much want to and are educated and are pushed to show off who they are. And that culturally or for whatever reason just hasn't made it into Europe and hasn't developed in Europe in the same way.
It's the exact opposite. 100% the opposite in Europe. It's like, keep to yourself. Don't talk too much. People are not supposed to see what you have, what you do. It's I'm not saying this is for everyone, of course not, but this is how we are raised. This is how we are raised when we are children. Like, no, you don't talk about that stuff in front of other people, This is like,
right.
It's like we're constantly shushed, Shh, be silent. It's for real. Like I have PTSD from being shushed, in life. It's crazy. Yeah, but it's like you're constantly forbidden to speak your mind. And speaking your mind doesn't have to be rude. Doesn't have to be, but you should be allowed to express yourself. And I think in European culture we are taught not to be ourselves, because that seems to be it might feel uncomfortable for other people.
Right. It might upset somebody. It might
upset somebody. Exactly. That's the correct way to put it is.
Yeah, you're so conscious of everybody else that you don't get to be yourself. Whereas, same thing in America, it's the complete opposite. It's no, I want to be me, screw everybody else. Like that's really what it is. So I think that could be why we have such a difference in those two cultures, is, simply because of that, is like, Americans are taught and pushed to be themselves, and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Whereas in Europe, it's don't upset the person next to you. So
I'm glad we got together, talking about that, because I had kind of the feeling that this would be an interesting thing to talk about, to share stigmas, to share experiences from our own markets, and our own lives. So, Reese, what I was wondering, because what we didn't talk much now is the South American drifting culture, and we are already 1 hour 50 something minutes into this, so I don't know how much time we still have.
It'll be quick because obviously the cost of things, the taxation on products that you have to get into South America is pretty high. So a coilover won't cost $1,000. It'll cost like maybe 25 if you don't know how to work customs correctly, or so that's a lot. I think it's they're a little bit behind a little bit when it comes to
Did you just
things.
put a factor of 25 on top of the price? Is it like that extreme?
Like $1,500.
You mean 2,500? You meant?
Yeah.
Okay.
So 25,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is a strong scene. Like in Chile, you got Franklin, who's doing a lot of good things over there. In this Nissan Lara that he has like a 1J in it. You have Brazil has the Super Drift, where you'll see Diego Higa, you'll see John Beer, and there's a bunch of drivers over there. Super Drift. There's the Drift Show Brazil that happens down there. Argentina has stuff, but they're so far over down that area, and they all want to try to come up to America. But I think financially, things that happen globally, politically, and all that other stuff. I think that all plays a serious role in South America right now. My family's from Colombia, and I would love for the Colombian drifting scene to go, but in Colombia, for an example, it's really hard for that to happen because the only thing available is BMWs. There is no 240s. Their 350Zs are really expensive. So it really depends where you're going in Central America, South America. Now, if you go to Costa Rica, it's a little bit more obtainable. You go to Panama, it's a little bit more obtainable. Puerto Rico has a scene. Dominican Republic has a scene. I think they're a little bit stronger there than you got Brazil. It's hard. I think I don't want to say it's not that they're not advanced, because Mexico also has a huge drifting scene and competition as well. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just a financial thing, and taxation and all that stuff that plays a huge role with what they can obtain over there, because it's not as like you were saying, Jacob, you can order something and it'll come here. Yeah. In Colombia, I can only speak for Colombia, but in Colombia, depending where you are in Colombia, you're not going to get what you need in 2 days if it's coming from the States or whatever. You know what I mean? It's a process depending where you are. You know what I mean?
I was just wondering when you were naming all those places, all those countries where drifting is done, in whatever capacity. And then we have Germany, where I still talk to people who don't even know really that it's existing. And that is so weird to me, I know when you're in it and it's your passion, you always think everyone needs to, has to have the same knowledge. And I know that's, that's kind of dreaming. But how is it possible that there's like such a big part of population that still doesn't know it's existing, and the whole world? I mean, we sold swap kits, BMW, V8 into E30s and stuff to French Polynesia. That island is, I think, 3 kilometers long. What are they doing with that? But they obviously needed to, to oversteer their cars. And it's it's such a big thing. It's such a big culture. It's like a way of moving a car that is enjoyable by absolutely everyone who ever did it and experienced it. So how is this not world domination? I don't get it. Something has been done wrong, or the wrong people have been attracted, to it.
It's a
I
plethora
don't get it.
of things,
I'm just wondering about it. It's weird to me.
It's a plethora of things. I mean, again, I want everything to go to South America and just have it explode. But like, I'd be lying to you if I didn't say there's a safety factor going from this country to that country, and if I'm gonna send a crazy car to Colombia, like I gotta pay extra to make sure it's gonna get where I want it to go to, because I'm going through the mountain. Like, that stuff is a reality. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
Chile, though, at least from my perspective, I think has a really good scene in Chile, because they have a lot of Japanese cars that come in. So there's a lot of cool stuff that's over there. But then it's also organization, and then the insurance, and then you're getting the government involved and that can get tricky down in South America. You know how it is. Yeah. It's just, it's not like America where it's like, oh, I'm going to hold you to your word. Like, it's going to be like, well, how much money you got to make this happen? You know what I mean? Okay, and that's a reality, at least down there. But you're right. It is. I jokingly say, I think everyone knows about drifting. Because you're like, how do you not? But yeah, it is crazy. There's people that just don't, for whatever reason, they just don't live under a rock or something. I don't know. They just don't know about drifting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. I think we're very close to something happening, whether it's good or bad or something along those lines that breaks into the zeitgeist of mainstream culture. It could be a crazy, I very rarely want to speak anything like bad happening to drifting or anything, but like maybe an accident or something happens and that's what puts it into the mainstream culture, and then it goes from there. Like, that's the thing, is like really, and it's not even drifting in the traditional sense, but like Ken Block probably moved the sport ahead more than what we saw in FD when it comes to like a public knowledge of like mom and dads, right? Like when I talked to my dad about drifting, the first name he brings up was Ken Block. He's like, oh, that guy. I'm like, kind of, but like not really.
Yeah. It puts you in
And
the
like-
neighborhood. Yeah.
Right. I think we're missing something going on that goes on to like mainstream news or ESPN or, BBC, like one of those things. Something has to happen. An athlete has to do something insane, or some deal has to work out, or there's some crazy wreck that then puts it into the public eye. But it has to be something that people can attach to. Because I know we talked about Federico, when that fire happened, that did make the rounds, that made it onto mainstream news in the US, but it wasn't like there was no feeling that got attached to it. But I think if there's something crazy that happens in drifting that the general public can relate to and get behind, we might see it then. And,
Well,
and
for
I
instance,
think,
Chelsea's argument where he like lashed out, and that resonated with a huge demographic, whether people agreed with how we went about it or they didn't agree with how they went about it.
Yeah.
There is an American demographic that was secretly under their breath was like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Because, and that exists. That's a reality. That is something that does exist. So
yeah,
it's really crazy depending where you are, how you go about it, how that's going to affect the outcome or the popularity or the recognition something will get, like you say, Jacob.
We're not far off. I think it's any day that something will catch and it'll become big, whether, it's a Netflix show or a YouTube edit or something, or a TikTok video that just explodes and hits the mainstream. Like we see it with music. I'm big into metal. The band Sleep Token exploded because of one part of one song, a band that's been on tour for years that never really got a ton of recognition. And one part of one song on TikTok exploded. And that band is now have sold out an entire tour in a matter of hours.
Or Hyperdrive with getting Fielding Shredder out there. Well, I've known about Fielding, but he was one of the first people, one of the Colombian kids brought to. He's like, do you know Fielding Shredder? Because they go on Netflix and they saw that this show is on Netflix, and from their perspective in South America, like that is the pinnacle. You know what I mean? So again, perspective is life. Yeah.
I personally think we're not at a point of magically something happening. I think we are at the point where drifting is reinvented. We reached a level that is very, very hard to beat. I don't know what more you want to do, right? Competition-wise. Like, I mean, like professionalism, speed, angle, all that has been played through 100,000 times now. And I think, Reese, you earlier talking about those 235, series and stuff. I think what's happening, and that's the same what's happening in Iron Drift King, is reinventing the sport, as we see fit or as we think it's the best way, for everyone involved. And I think that is what's happening right now in drifting, because the market is full with generic drifting.
The same thing. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. 4 cars, 2-car teams. So then it's like you alternate the 2 cars, right? So you've got these 2 cars. So it's like team A, team B, team A, team B, all on the track at the same time. It's a 4-car tandem, and that's how you do it. Somebody steal that idea.
Have you been ready for that talk now, or where did this come from?
I think that's the next episode.
Jumps. Don't you guys have a track in Europe where this BMW jumped or something like that? Like he went over a hill?
Yes. Yeah.
Like that was awesome. I could just see a video of that all day.
Yeah, it's in Estonia. It's called Lights Rally Park. It's essentially a rallycross track. And I have been driving that. But not, you talk that huge downhill jump, right?
Yeah.
Because the layout that we have been driving, also James have been driving, it was called Drift All-Stars at this time. Like you were accelerating from the start, and so standing start, accelerating as fast as you can and initiating before the jump. So your car had to be sideways before the jump. If not, you have been going into the wall and your car was done because you basically scraped the wall while jumping over that west, and you had to be a good amount of sideways. That was cool, but what they did a few years later is this crazy jump, that like very down the hill, and that looked cool, right? That looked very cool.
It looked like a long weekend, but it looked really cool. It looked like you're like, well, boys, I feel like you got to talk to your crew and get the okay. Like, yeah, is it cool if I do this? Because I'm probably going to mess everything up.
You guys are going to have a lot of work to do if I do this. Yeah.
Yeah, go for it. You know what I mean? I think that stuff is definitely good, or like blackout tunnels, or like anything that's like, I love seeing drifting, but I'm tired of seeing it at racetracks. I am. The most fun I've ever had in drifting was when I got to go down the mountain, a couple months ago. Maybe it's nostalgia, like you said, it's a drug. But I think cooler events, like we're aesthetically putting people in different areas, is like the way to go. Like I want to find an abandoned town in America somewhere that no one's using and be like, all right, boys, like we're just drifting this entire town. You know what I mean? Like someone's going to do it now, but I mean like that, that'd be cool.
That's the cool thing about drifting. That is why it's so hard to understand how this sport has not become such a huge influence in the world, because drifting is adaptable. You can do it literally anywhere. The weather doesn't really matter. It's like it's a sport that is really easy to apply to any geographical what is it? Oh, now I talked myself into English. I cannot continue. Like
I know. Yeah, it's kind of like the
geographical condition. It doesn't really matter where you are. So you find a cool place, and you can do it there. You just have to be creative, and you also need the funds to do it and stuff. But man, that's why I love drifting. You can reinvent yourself, and make your vision a reality. Like, what was this Red Bull car park drift, or how did they call it? Red Bull
shifters.
Shifters.
Yeah. You can do so much with that kind of car movement.
Yeah.
And when every major car brand on this planet is even advertising their front wheel drive cars, with it sliding around the corner, over steering kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Why we are not, man? It's like this should be the main religion on this planet.
Yeah.
I mean, it may not be for us. It may be the next generation once we get in older positions and we can make those moves. You know what I mean? But it is cool. I mean, again, what you're saying is pretty much what street skating is. They just realized they wanted to get off the ramp, and they just started realizing, oh, this whole world is a playground. Obviously, there's a financial end when it comes to drifting, but that's very much so. I think that's why the beauty about global drifting is that if I go to Japan, I know what type of drifting I'm going to find, what type of flavors they have there. If I go to New Zealand or Australia, I know what I'm going to get there. I know what cars I'm going to see in South Korea, so on and so forth. You know what I mean? And I think that's what the beauty is about drifting, that like I can get up and go to another country, and the foundation and the basics of drifting will be the same, but the personality, the presentation, the delivery of what drifting looks like in another country is by nature going to look different. And I think that is probably the most invaluable thing about our sport currently.
And here we are at the point where you can combine all that knowledge, all those cultures, all those different ways of how it's done into one series, into one event. Like you have 40 different nationalities in one event participating, all with their absolutely own flavor, but to one rule set, on track. But around that, be colorful, do your thing, be different. People like that. That's why we go to a different restaurant, because we don't know how it tastes. And that's the same here. So why we don't combine it? We have all the power in the world with drifting to connect multinational, people with our own ideas and styles and colors and whatnot. It's like, that's so cool. And I have the feeling in Europe, we do not embrace that. And that's what we try. This is what we try here. So
because if anybody from America like were to say, oh, I'm going to go drive in France, or I'm going to go drive in Spain, or I'm going to go drive in Germany, like geographically, it's so far away that we just immediately go, wow, how did you even get your car there? Or what did you get?
Yeah.
So it's cool to just, and it doesn't even matter if you even win the competition, or as long as you went there and you threw down in some car in a different country, that's almost good enough for us. Because it's like, we know the journey of what it takes to go out there, especially for a common person, to find something like that. And that's what attracts a lot of us. You know what I mean? Like, I would love to go drift on this island. You know, that would be sick. You know what I mean? Because over there, it's like, oh, and an American came, but like back home, it's like, bro, you went where to drift with who on a drift island? And there was what? And there was like, it looked like this and all that type of stuff. You know what I mean?
But it's actually still very special to have U.S. drivers compete. You know,
right? And vice versa.
Yeah.
Vice versa.
Yeah. You know, it's
believe it or not, us North Americans we're like kind of a novelty when we go over there. So
yeah. But we fanboy about you guys like crazy. It's crazy. We always think whatever's greener on the other side is what's better.
But they fanboy about us, right? Like that's the thing. We talk about this. Talk about this with Japan. We talk about this with anywhere, right? Like just different is cool. That's it. If you can't get it, if it's not something that's day to day for you, it's cool. It doesn't matter if it's better or worse or whatever. It's just it's different, so it's cool.
Correct. Because in Australia, Luke Fink is like, oh, a Corvette's like a luxury car. To us, it's like a Corvette.
I'm kind of sick of them. Yeah.
You know, I'm like, whatever. All we see is Corvettes now. You know,
I got one of LS engines. Yeah.
Yeah. But everywhere in other places, they're like, oh, because they don't have it. It's not a normality. Yeah. I've talked to people that are tired of 1Js, which blows my mind. I could never get tired of listening to a 1J.
Yeah.
But it's a normal thing for them. That's all they ever hear is turbos and stuff. So when they hear a V8, they're like, oh, that's so cool because it's different. You know what I mean? Like everyone over here is like, oh, Drift Masters or D1. And then you got people that are like, oh, FD. And it's all because like, since it isn't your day to day, it's attractive to you. It's different. And that's what makes us travel. You know what I mean? Because I don't know Europe very well. All I want to do is go there and drift there. Yeah. Because I'm ignorant. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, this is, I knew this was going to take a bit. I mean, as soon as we started talking about this, I'm like, this will be good. And Reese and I already know we can talk for an entire day without going over the same thing. So, cool. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate setting some time aside for this. Reese, thank you for coming on and giving your perspective. And
sorry for the technical difficulty.
It's all good. All good. Anybody listening or watching at home, hopefully they have no idea. We'll see how the editor does.
It'll just get cut and everything.
It's all good. It's all good.
Thank you guys very much. I really, this was a really cool topic. These are just things that I get to think about in my head and not actually say, because I don't really get to speak from someone from Europe all the time. So it's cool to have that perspective.
Thank you so much. Goes the same for me. It's fantastic to talk to passionate people, and it's not often you find someone else who's as passionate about it and then has completely different experience. And that's super cool. So, I hope people listening and watching this appreciate, what we did, and I appreciate everyone who is putting 2 hours and 13 minutes time to watch and listen to this. So go on a road trip, it will be on Spotify, and just listen to it and enjoy it. Real drifting culture and emotion and passion here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you again, everybody, for listening and watching. Again, my name is Jacob, Marcel, and Reese. And we'll catch you guys on the next one.
Drift Island, the Iron Drift King podcast, hosted by Marcel Uhlig and Jacob Gettins.